All right, guys, welcome to a brand new episode of SideQuest Podcast. Listen in and level up. I have a great episode for you today, but first, as always, let's get through the show notes. If you're not following the Facebook page, head over to Facebook, type SideQuest Fitness into the search bar, and like the page. There, you're going to get updates on podcast episodes, articles when they get posted, and you're going to get a brand new taco recipe every Tuesday for taco camp. Plus lots of other shenanigans and nerd talk throughout the week, so make sure you head over to Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is SideQuestFM. If you want to see some cool videos and random stuff on Instagram as well, you can follow me on Instagram, same handle, SideQuestFM, or follow me on Snapchat, SideQuestFit. Follow me there. Send me your questions. I want to get all the questions from you, help you as much as I can on your fitness journey or your journey in life, whatever it may be. But head over to Snapchat, SideQuestFit. Follow me there. You get a little more personal, in-depth look at the shenanigans I get into throughout every day. But I do love getting questions from the community, so please send them out to me. If you have not left a review for the podcast, please head over to iTunes. If you're not listening on iTunes and you listen on SoundCloud or Stitcher, leave a review there as well. When you leave reviews, it helps me move up the charts on the iTunes store so that more people can see and hear the amazing guests that I've had on and have on each and every single week. So make sure you head over there. And don't forget, if you haven't picked up your copy of the 7 Principles of Fat Loss, head over to sidequestfitness.com/7 principles, and you can pick up your copy of the 7 Principles of Fat Loss. These are the same 7 principles I follow each and every day and teach my clients to help them shred away more body fat, unlock heroic strength, and just look better naked. So if you want to unlock strength or just look better naked in the mirror, head over again, grab those 7 principles of fat loss, and start following those today. All right, guys, I have a great episode for you today. Some really, really cool stuff coming to you in this episode of Coach's Corner. This is a 2-part episode, so please listen very, very carefully. A 2-part episode. Part 1 is out today, Monday, January 9th. Second part will be out Thursday, January 12th, all in 2017. So if you're listening to this past those dates, make sure you grab part 2 as well. It went over well over an hour and a half. Myself, Aadam Ali, Nick Sorrell, and Tanner Baze talking about metaphysics, myths, heroes, superheroes, pop culture icons that all connect to us in some way, that connect to the Campbellian hero's journey, but also talking a lot about Dr. Jordan Peterson. He has influenced all of us so much in the last few months, in the last year, reading his stuff, his lectures on YouTube. So we've been talking about him in a Facebook chat that all of us are in. And all this talk about Star Wars and The Matrix and Harry Potter and the Hunger Games and everything else you can think of inspired us. And we were like, you know what? Let's talk about this. This is stuff we want to geek out on. It's stuff nerds and geeks love as well. But first, before we get into this, I have to give a huge shout out to my friend and mentor, John Romanello. He is the guy who sort of brought the hero's journey into the world of fitness with his book, Man 2.0, Re-Engineering the Alpha. He's written about it a million times. And all of his work has influenced all of us. So, John, if you're listening, thank you so much for your influence and what you've done. And if you haven't checked out that episode, he came on the show as well. So check that out on iTunes. And you can find all this again in the show notes, sidequestfitness.com/podcast. Head over there and you can find this episode and the show notes for everything we talk about with Dr. Jordan Peterson, comic books, video games, everything that we get into as well. And a link for part 2 when that goes live on the site. So I'm going to shut up. Let's get into it. Let's hear and let's talk about the awesome nerd stuff that we love together. That is superheroes, Harry Potter, Dr. Jordan Peterson. And we do go into a little bit of how all of this translates into you living a more virtuous and moral life.
Step up and you gotta get it fitness. Host Rob at the moment and the quest is you gotta check it and wreck it. You're breaking personal records and with the help of the guests you won't be guessing on the lessons. That's a +5 fierce. Got a low-key bamf right here. You wanna meet him, there's no better way to greet him than to strike a boss pose. Take a look into the mirror.
All right, guys, welcome to the show. I have a great show for you today. Tanner Baze, Aadam Ali, and Nick Sorrell join me again. because we're gonna get nerdy on this one. We're gonna get deep, philosophical. We're gonna talk about myths, specifically the myths of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. We're gonna talk a little Jordan B. Peterson. If you haven't seen any of his stuff, go to YouTube right now or check it out in the show notes. I'll have links to that. He has a podcast now as well. And his 3.5 hour, almost 4 hour interview with Joe Rogan is mind blowing. So you got to check that out. We're going to talk about why we need myths, why they're important, and how they can help you not only in your fitness journey, but everywhere in life. We've been geeking out on this whole conversation for about a month and a half, and I was like, that's it. We're doing a podcast. So hopefully we bring the magic of that conversation in. All right, guys. So in our little chat group, we've been talking a lot about why myths are important. And I'll let sort of maybe Tanner or Adam go into this. I know Tanner is probably as well versed in the hero's journey as anyone I know. But for anyone who's listening who's like, what the fuck are you talking about the hero's journey? Go into a little brief explanation about what that is real quick, and then we can and why it influences myth and why it's behind Star Wars, Harry Potter. I guess you could argue Game of Thrones, but maybe not. The Hunger Games and so much, but why you can see it in everything and why the most successful films tend to work when they hit this archetype.
Okay, so for those who don't know, it's by the way, a huge amount of credit for this deservedly goes to John Romaniello. So he's at least in the fitness sphere, single-handedly responsible for bringing the Campbellian model into the mainstream. But essentially, the hero's journey is nothing more than a story arc that we all know and love, and that every great story follows. And it was found by a philosopher and writer and mythologist, Joseph Campbell, and posited by him. And it essentially says that every great story goes through, when Campbell did it, it was, I think, 17 steps. It's been distilled down into 12 easier to follow steps. But every great story follows this arc, and it runs in a circle. And there are major checkpoints in every single story. You've got to have your call to adventure, your refusal to call. You've got to you've got to go through the ordeal after meeting your mentor and crossing the threshold. So it's a lot of things that go on. But the important thing to know about it is every single story that has ever become just this smash fucking hit in pop culture and just culture in general follows this arc. Star Wars follows the exact same arc as Harry Potter. Harry Potter follows the exact same arc as The Hobbit. Those are the three biggest examples that are really easy to relate to, just because they all mimic one another. Now, the really important thing that I think, it's cool to recognize, all these stories are the same, but most people listening probably more or less knew that. What I think is the coolest thing is that, we enjoy this so much, and we unwittingly seek these stories out, because of what they speak to within us. If you hear about the hero's journey and that people follow a story writing formula, it feels a little disingenuous, because it's all the things that I know and love are half baked and stolen. And that's not what it is. What really it is these stories manifest over and over and over again, oftentimes unknowingly by the people creating them, because it's such a deep, visceral thing within us, and it's so symbolic of this process and this journey that we all know and love within us, that we are inevitably trying to follow and mimic.
Right, because if you think about it, it really is the story of life. I immediately just thought of being like 5 years old and your call to adventure is going to kindergarten, and your refusal to call is to like scream and cry and like, "Mom, don't take me away! Don't make me go!" Like you could think about it in so many of those aspects of where it comes in life. Like, okay, then crossing the threshold is going into the class. Meeting allies is making friends. Like your big temptation is like having to learn a whole new world, and then you come out of like kindergarten, you're like, "Oh my God, I know how to like be in school now." But you're totally different from that 1 year of going through all those changes.
Well, and that's actually a really important thing. And I think all of y'all will totally agree with this. All right, I know you will, but
I disagree.
Yeah, of course. So like when people think about like the hero's journey and like following this sort of thing in their life, it becomes like really meta and like this 100,000-foot view of like, well, like I don't know how my life is going to end, so like it's hard for me to plot that. But like in reality, like it's just a cycle of journeys. It's just a ton of different journeys, and you can find those within shows. Where like you mentioned Game of Thrones, like there are a number of different situations in Game of Thrones where each character is having their hero's journey. So. Because that show, like, there are so many plot lines happening at the moment that, like, but if you break it down and you look at just Jon Snow, or if you look at Sansa, or somebody like that, like, they each are going through their own hero's journeys, and that's a big thing in life. Like, kindergarten itself is a hero's journey. Going through the entire school system is a hero's journey in a sense. And then, so it's just... there are all of these cycles happening at once, and you may be going through a hero's journey in the relationship portion of your life while also going through it in the schooling or professional portion of your life.
Right. I mean, just to sort of jump in quickly, I mean, Tanner, for example, you're moving to New York, I think tomorrow or sometime.
Tomorrow,
right?
Yeah.
Right, and that's like a meta hero's journey. I think that's what you're trying to say. Like we're constantly going through.
Right.
It's not like Harry Potter starts in Hogwarts and then he defeats Voldemort and then that's the end of his hero's journey. I mean, in real life, hopefully it's like cycles and seasons of like, quote unquote, birth, death, and then rebirth, where we're sort of leaving a past self, of a version of ourselves. And then once we've achieved this newer version, then we start a new, like a part 2 or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And for example, I'm coming out to NYC in February. That's like a hero's journey for me because I've never been to the States before. So I think, that's a great point, that it's not like this thing where it just begins and ends at this, and it's going to be like some significant thing that happens. And I think this is something I wrote about to do with fat loss, where people think that one day they're just going to wake up and they're just going to be ripped and they keep waiting for this day to happen. But then what happens is, but they don't realize that the changes are occurring anyway, and because they're waiting for this big day to happen, they fail to just enjoy the process and the moment. And I think that's one thing that this mythology teaches us, that it's not so much about. There's a great quote by Jordan Peterson, who says, "It's not about where you want to go. It's about, you know what? Hold that thought, because I'm going to find it. I want to say it because I don't want to like.
Find that, because I feel like 7 minutes in, people are like, I don't know what myths. Okay, so the myths that we're sort of talking about are, even like the ancient myths. You could go back to the Christ, the Buddha, ancient Egyptian myths, Greek gods. All those follow a very similar sort of storyline. Same thing now with like Star Wars and Harry Potter, The Matrix. All of them follow those. But the reason that and we kind of touched on it a bit, is why this is so important is because myths sort of give us an idea of what we can be and show us how we can live. And I think in a very scientific world that we live in today, people have forgotten how powerful those myths can be, because you're just looking for the facts.
Right. So I found that quote. So Jordan Peterson says, "Don't go thinking that getting to where you want to go is what you want. What you want is to bloody well make sure that the voyage is worth it." Which I think is... Yeah. So, it's like, because people become so focused on the abs, the fat loss, the muscle gain, whatever the case is, just to tie it in with the sort of the side quest audience, that they fail to realize that all these things are happening on a day-to-day basis. So it's like that death and rebirth on a day-to-day basis. Every day you go to the gym and you eat well, or you eat better than the day before, you're destroying an older version of yourself. So if you're someone who has a lot of fat to lose, for example, every day that you're consistent with your diet, every day that you're consistent with going to the gym and putting in the effort on a day-to-day basis, you're, proverbially dying, and you're coming back as a new person on a day-to-day basis, because every time you have every time you have a day where you've hit your diet on point, every day you go in and you train hard, that's something that your past self wasn't doing. So in that sense, you're getting better every day. And as cliche as it is, there's a reason why all these things are cliche, because they're true. Right. So yeah, that's why I thought that was a powerful quote by Peterson.
All right, so Nick's been really silent on this. I kind of want to go into and break down just a couple of, and this is like a very overview. So you've heard us talk about death and resurrection and all that, and that you see in the books. But a lot of things in the books can sort of be broken down by you get an introduction to the character. So you are you in your ordinary world. You get told of this really awesome place you can go to. You go to it, Hogwarts, and then you go through all the trials and tribulations, and then there's this treasure that you have to get to that's being guarded by a dragon. In this sense, we'll go with Harry Potter, is Voldemort. Sorry, he who should not be named. So he's the one guarding that treasure. In all other stories, it could be the Death Star, it could be Vader, it could be an actual dragon or whatever. Then you defeat that dragon, you get the treasure, and you come back, bring it back to the regular world. So that's sort of a roundabout way.
But I mean, think about it. In Harry Potter, was it the Chamber of Secrets where the three-headed dog is guarding the chamber?
Yeah.
Right. That's basically what. So it's like, and again, it's about you have to get what you want, you have to face that dragon. So Harry had to defeat the three-headed dog first before he could get into the chamber to get to where he wants to go, which I think was to save Ginny in this scenario, right? So it's like, and then when he gets into the Chamber of Secrets, he has to fight the basilisk. So it's like, it's just a reminder that every time you want to go get something that you really want, you're going to have to face some form of challenge. And it's only after you face that challenge and you overcome it, you can get where you want and come back with something of value, right?
So
I think
go ahead, Nick.
The cool thing about, it's with myths and stuff like that, like how you talked about, people listen to this probably trying to make sense of what we're talking about while we're talking about it and stuff like that. And I think the big thing with myths is that they're almost just the vehicle of kind of explaining this journey, all these different steps that we talk about, whether it's Joseph Campbell or Jordan Peterson or whoever we're talking about. We can talk about rebirth or the call to action or returning with the elixir or whatever, and talk about these steps. And we can explain what each one of these steps are, but it's really hard for people to grasp, especially and apply it to themselves. So I think where myths come into play is that they're able to take this idea, this set of steps, this journey, and put it in a way that people are able to grasp. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So
they can put themselves in those shoes. So when people are hearing about Harry Potter or whatever, it's not so much his journey specifically. It's metaphorical, and it kind of illustrates the journey. It kind of helps people make sense of it. So that's why I think we're talking about all these things, is that whenever you hear us talk about the Chamber of Secrets and fighting your dragons and stuff like that, you have to break it down into what your things are. So whatever your dragon is whatever you're struggling with, and your treasure is whatever your goal is. And that goal can be losing weight, your goal can be getting a new job, your goal can be graduating college, your goal can be waking up on time tomorrow, whatever it is. And you have to kind of break these down in your own way. I think that's the thing about narratives. It helps people make sense of these things more so than the myth being the big deal. I think the myth is almost a vehicle for explaining the journey and the steps and stuff.
Right. It's exactly what it is, because it just provides a roadmap.
Right.
Exactly.
All it is a roadmap. I fucked up and I did this, and now here's the next step, because I inherently know the next step because I'm the hero of this journey, and I've seen this journey made through a number of different ways a million times. Here's the next step. Okay, how do I get there?
Right. And I think that's actually a great point, Tanner, because I mean, this goes back to what we spoke about in the past before coming to the podcast about why we're so attracted to the anti-hero, you know, like characters like Batman, because, and I think this is also why Superman doesn't have that same appeal, because Superman's perfect, right? He's like this god figure.
Yeah, well, when they first designed him, like, he was supposed to be, you know, a representation of God, like, you know, a god on Earth. Yeah,
right.
And it's like we can't relate to that, because it's like, how can we relate to someone who's perfect? It's like, yeah, it's cool to look at and watch him do all this super stuff and, you know, beat up aliens and whatnot, but we can relate to characters like Harry Potter who are struggling with the sort of the good and the bad, because it's in the Order of the Phoenix, Harry goes to Sirius Black. He says, I'm always angry.
Yeah.
You know, and he's almost doubting himself because he knows that, because they've already just told him that, look, Voldemort can read your mind, like he's trying to get into your head. And then so he's like he's conflicted between wanting to do the right thing and also the temptation of the dark side. You know, quote, you know, so the proverbial dark side as opposed to like the Jedi version.
Still works. But, still works though.
Right. But that's the thing. It's like when we look at heroes like Batman, the reason why they appeal to us so much, and when we say things like they're you know, quote unquote realistic, Batman isn't realistic because if we had the money or the genetics or the, you know, whatever, the time to become Batman, we could become Batman. It's because when we look at someone like Batman, we see ourselves. Like this is a guy who he's trying to do the best he can, but at the same time he's fighting his demons on a day-to-day basis. Like and again, I think, you know, it's the whole thing of like, why is Joker Batman's you know, out of all the super villains in the DC universe, why is Joker Batman's most formidable enemy? It's because Joker is a representation of what Batman could have become if he gives into those dark urges and, you know, all those thoughts that he has, that sort of battle with his demons, which is what everyone goes through, right?
Yeah,
right. Like,
that's like perfect. An old thought process. Like, not only does it go back to like the Jedi stuff, like the light side and the dark side, and like Anakin, you know, like Luke could have been Anakin if he made the wrong choices, right? But this stuff goes like way back further. It goes back to like Thor and Loki, the two brothers, one kind of good, one kind of bad. And it goes back even further to that. Like in the Bible, you got like Cain and Abel. And I know you guys have heard George.
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
Exactly.
Two brothers that like had a lot in common, except one's life went perfect, one's life went bad because of the choices they made throughout the process. And it's not that, and I think like a lot of people, like when they read these stories, like take them too literally, you know, like, well, I don't have a brother, that doesn't apply to me. Like, no, that it's not meant to be like two different people. Like both those people are the same person. Joker and Batman's the same person. The light and the dark side, you know, it's the same thing. It's just like we all have these certain struggles, and it's about the choices we make, whether we tend more towards the right or the wrong side or whatever.
You know, so there's a really important caveat that I want to add to this, because this is something that I don't think gets talked about enough. For people listening to this, you know, like when people start talking about symbolism of stories, the immediate thought is that, like, okay, are you really telling me that Tolkien decided to write it like this because he was trying to get this actual message across, like this deeper meaning message? And it's like maybe Tolkien did, because like obviously the dude put a ton of work into the universe, but like on the whole, it's not that, you know, the guys writing the Batman comics wanted the Joker to be this antithesis of Batman who could also be what Batman became. It's that these archetypes are so deeply ingrained within us and are so much a part of who we are that they just show up over and over and over again. And we're now starting to realize like what we think that might show.
Well, and if you think about it, like you have hot and cold, you have north and south, you have east and west, and even if you put the two directions God, I do not even want to think about the fucking ring theory that someone thought about with Star Wars. But like East and West are kind of almost the mirror opposite of each other on like the hero's journey. The same with the North and South. Like now you got to come back, and it's like the complete opposite. But I think one of those things that, and I'm getting to my point, is that we talked about dragons and demons and fighting your demons, is that you have good and evil inside of you. That's why all stories talk about good and talk about evil, because you have the capacity to be evil. You have the capacity to be really good. But I think as we were talking about this, one thing I've been thinking about a lot as I'm working on this this Thanos article is that no matter where you go in life, and you can see it in video games, Bowser, Ganondorf, you see it. I mean, if Harry Potter kept going, he'd probably fight Voldemort for the rest of his life. But like you said, Voldemort was in his mind. And, your success is in your mind, but your failure is in your mind as well. And those things are battling all the time. You're going to fight the same demon throughout your life. Like, it's going to morph and change. And I sort of want to morph and kind of go into that now. Like, in these myths, like, we talked about, Batman could become Joker. What would happen if, like, Batman did, like, if you look at it in The Dark Knight, the movie, Joker wasn't out to, like, piss Batman off. His entire thing was, I'm going to turn a good man evil.
Right.
I mean, what's the guy, the one who turns into Two-Face? I can't remember his name now.
Harvey Dent.
Right, he says, what does he say? He says, you either die the hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. See, most people think of when I first heard that, and it took me some time to really sit down and think about that, because for some reason that line really stood out to me. But he's not talking about the literal, like, if you become a bad person. He's talking about if you live long enough, you're gonna be, the temptation to become bad, or it's gonna be stronger. As in, you're gonna come to a point in your life where you're gonna have to make that choice. And that's what I think he was referring to. So what he said was, you either die the hero, but if you live long enough, you're going to have to face those demons. You're going to have to come to the harsh reality that is life, that you're going to have to make that hard choice of choosing something that isn't good, right? The evil thing, quote unquote, or doing something which may not be easy, but it's going to be the best thing, or like, the long term.
We've all like heard like how like you said it earlier, like how like when you make a certain choice, like a part of you dies and stuff like that. And I think like that's kind of that's probably not like the way that line was meant, to like either die a hero or you live long enough to become a villain or whatever. But like whenever you like be a hero, like whenever you do the right thing and stuff like that, like there's a part of you, that temptation that you have to let die. Whether it be like you repeatedly eat bad food, and you either let that part of yourself die and be a hero, or you keep with it and you become a villain. You make the wrong choice.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of see what happened. Sorry, go on.
I just thought that was a interesting like wraparound or whatever. Like whenever you be the hero, like you have to let a part of yourself die. Like, because we all have temptations and we all do wrong things at certain points, whether it be lie to a loved one, or we lazy, we don't follow through with what we say, we make a promise and we break it or whatever like that. The reason we do those things is because like that's what we want to do. Like, it's way easier and stuff like that. And whenever those choices rise up, you have to choose against it. And whenever you do, that part of yourself dies, and you become better at following through with whatever that journey is, that little tiny mini like hero's journey or whatever.
Right, and I mean we know. I mean, again, mythology told us what happens if we give into those temptations, and it's those. It may not be just a one time, but if you keep letting those things build up, you turn into, the mythological representation is Anakin Skywalker. So, he was constantly, he's resentful because the Jedi Order, the Council weren't letting him, they weren't giving him a chance to he felt like they weren't giving him a chance to live up to his potential. So he became resentful, and then what happens? The dark side offers him that opportunity, and he takes it. So I think that's like a sort of a stark warning of what happens if you do go down that road and you do sort of give into those urges and whatever. So yeah,
I think so I'm trying to listen more and let you guys sort of talk. The only thing I can think like from that is that like in everything we do, oh God, now I've lost my thought. Like it was there and now it's gone. And I don't edit this shit. Go, Nick.
No, I am like that. Whenever I like, that's the hard part about all this stuff is like whenever these subjects get brought up, and we all listen to a decent amount of like either lectures or we read, the books on it. I've never read like the Hero's Journey book, but I think you two have, Tanner and Robbie. I don't know if Adam has. So we do a lot of research about stuff, and all of us, like you said, for like the past month and a half or so, have been like just talking about it constantly. And it's because that's this stuff. Like whenever you really look into it, it like rings so like deeply within you. Like it resonates so hard. And despite that fact, like it's such like a complex subject. It's such like a deep, subjective, like difficult thing to talk about. So like how you just like had your train of thought and then you lost it. That's what I kind of feel during this stuff, because it's such like a vast topic that it's really interpretive, and there's probably not an exact 100% rule. It's so open.
Right. Well, that's
a subject to talk about. To think about.
That's the issue. Like it's just totally natural for us to try and like box it in and create this like this step-by-step process. But in reality, like that's why the Campbellian monomyth, the hero's journey itself, is so perfect, because it is that step-by-step process, and you just take that roadmap and you view every story that you're taking in through the lens of that roadmap, and then you begin to view your life through that lens and the events that go on.
I thought like it was completely on point what you said earlier about how like did Tolkien like mean to tell this journey within the story, and like I think like he didn't at all, and I think most people don't. I think this stuff is like is so deeply seated inside of us that we naturally cling to these things. We try to tell stories in this way, and the stories that do break through and become like transcendent or whatever, whether it be like Lord of the Rings or Batman, these things that stick around and really are polarizing and big and we all can like resonate with. I don't think it's that like they're better. I just think they nailed the myth. They like nailed the archetype. I don't think they meant to. I think it's just they tried to, and they
but
happened
I
to drill
think
it,
part of that also is sort of going back to the kindergarten thing, and now I know where I want to go in my thought. Like it's the story of life. Like you kind of do this, you have this thing, and then you realize, oh shit, I have other people that I have to work with, and you have these challenges, and you have to overcome the challenges, and like our species is a species that this archetype of the hero's journey explains, like how you got away from a saber-toothed tiger. I was about to say triceratops. No, the Earth is older than that. But like you had to escape these animals. You had to get away from them. Like those were your challenge. You had to go through ceremonies from becoming a boy to a man. Like all of this is sort of subconsciously passed down to us. But now I remember where I wanted to go. And we've talked about the dragon and facing your issues and your challenges. And I mentioned this in my episode on why Star Wars is important to me, that you have to face your Death Star in life, no matter what it is, that you have to face the dragon. And Jordan Peterson has talked about this. And I think in many ways, it's sort of the refusal of the call, but most people a lot of times are like, I'd really like to lose weight, but I don't I know I'm going to have to change. I don't want to do it. Or, I really want to do this thing and start this business, or man, I really want to change myself or my attitude, but I don't know. But the dragon that you have to fight, where you have to go is inside of you. The cave is inside. The Death Star trench that you have to go down is inside of you. You have to face the dragon. So I want to kind of go into that about why you need to face the dragon in your journey wherever you go. So you guys jump off with.
Because if you don't, you fucking become the Joker or Voldemort. Like
Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, so you become Darth Vader then. He has that very literal transformation, like where he's refused it and now undergoes this complete physical transformation because of it. That's it, man. Like it's that simple. Like, and maybe. You don't become let's say you're overweight right now and you want to lose weight and look better, but you refuse the call. You probably don't become the fucking Joker and your entire goal is to make the world burn, but Like your own internal world will continue to burn and burn more than it ever has because you'll live in a state of unhappiness because you're not going along that journey. And that's
that, like, so we've all read the book The Alchemist, and if you haven't, you should. The Alchemist talks about like how like the world gives you signs for these things, and a lot of times these signs are just like urges, you know, like intuition. You have this in your gut. And I think a lot of times that's what the call to action is. It isn't like some wizard showing up at your doorstep telling you to do whatever.
Right.
Although that'd be cool. I think a lot of times it's just an urge you get in your gut to do something, to say something. And a lot of times that same urge is something uncomfortable, whether it be you telling your girlfriend that her breath stinks in the morning, she needs to start brushing her teeth or whatever, or that you don't like the way you look in the mirror. You get this urge, but then like the acts involved are uncomfortable. So like, telling her that her breath stinks will probably offend her and you don't want to tell her, or seeing yourself as fat in the mirror means you have to go to the gym and that's uncomfortable. So people a lot of times will refuse the call, right? And so what that means is they don't tell their girlfriend or they don't go to the gym. And what happens there is that you do become resentful. This dragon, which is something that could have been just a conversation or just starting and going to the gym, gets bigger and bigger and bigger the longer you don't confront it. So eventually you become resentful, like you guys say. You start to like hate seeing your girlfriend in the morning. You start to hate seeing yourself in the mirror, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until either you finally accept the call and you have to fight this huge dragon, or until you die, metaphorically, right?
Right. Yeah, your girlfriend just kills you. But so we were talking about this before the podcast died about in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, where in that film, Voldemort's sort of massing his army. He's like freeing everyone from Azkaban and what he's like trying to, get all the Death Eaters together, right? And the Ministry are just like, no, everything's fine. They're just like turning a blind eye to this dragon that's slowly growing. And Harry Potter and everyone's like, look, there's this dude. I'm telling you, he killed Cedric. He's back. I saw him. And they're like, no. Everything's fine. Just it's fine. Just carry on with your studies and blah blah. And then what happens? The dragon gets to a point where Voldemort's back now. He gets revived. All the Death Eaters are here. They're just fucking everything up. And now it's just to a point where Dumbledore dies and everything descends into hell, so to speak, right? So it's like the whole thing where you're saying that it's hard because if the Ministry, to use a metaphor in Harry Potter, it would have been hard for them to admit that they were wrong. And, maybe everyone would have doubted their whatever, whatever the case. But it's hard for them to sort of admit that they were wrong. But at the same time, it would have saved them a lot more trouble in the future. So it's the same thing about, for example, if you have an issue with, say, your girlfriend or a family member or a friend, it's better for you to just deal with that problem at the start. And if there is an argument, whatever the case may be, it's not going to be as bad as holding in that resentment and it turning into this.
And even if the argument is bad, I'm a married guy and I say and do stupid things all the time that like start arguments. And I like imagine that they're not, but like, or I say how I feel, or my wife tells me how she feels. Like, you need to do that because if you don't, that little thing will stack up and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will consume one person, or your issue could consume you. And I think this goes even deeper, like whatever issues you have in your life, and I've written about it with my dad before, like I know that everything I do in life goes back to not feeling like I'm good enough for my dad. I don't feel like my business is good enough. I don't feel like my writing is good enough. I don't feel like my podcasting is good enough. Like all of these things. And I know that is my dragon that I have to face for my whole life. And that sometimes it's true. I probably put out some shit that I shouldn't and I could do better. Awesome. Because I'm trying to get better. But if I just allowed that to seep into me and really take over my life, the dragon would rule my life, because then I would just think that, well, what's the point in even trying? I'm just going to fail and like never do anything.
Right. I think you would become despondent and just not do a fucking thing.
Right.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get stuck there because they miss, I don't know, they like don't understand like their own emotions. So like they fear that uncomfortable thing or that hardship or whatever that's like staring them in the face. And they look at fear as something they shouldn't do. Whereas fear is something that you should do. It's just going to suck doing it. So a lot of times whenever you fear this thing, like, or you feel this like deep emotion or whatever, people turn away, and really that's like a calling, right? So like from The Alchemist. It's like a sign, like, it's not that you shouldn't do it, it's that you fear it, it's important, you really, really fucking have to do it, even though it's going to be hard. But a lot of people turn away at fear, and that's just them not understanding their own emotions. It's a calling, it's not like a stop sign.
It's like a yield sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keep going, just watch yourself.
I like it. I know we've been on fire talking about this in our message, our Facebook Messenger group. But where do you see the sort of the hero's journey, or how do myths, or what myths like really empower you in your life? Like how do you see all this fitting into? I mean, most of us have somewhat conquered our sort of fitness myth, if you will. Like obviously we can still get stronger and still do other things and grow as coaches, but like where else do you see this influencing you, and what story does it?
For me personally, I think that I like the anti-hero, and I like that because I like really dark shit.
Oh yeah, you like the anti-hero? I didn't know.
All right, yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, the reason for that is because it's not as clear cut as I think some superheroes like Superman try and make it seem. Like it's not always going to be so easy to always do the right thing. Like temptation's always going to be there, and that's the part of that process. It's part of being a human being. Like you're always going to do shit that you're going to hate later on. Like, you're going to make mistakes, and you're not perfect, you're flawed. And that's the reason why the anti-hero is so much more appealing to me, because they understand that they're flawed, but they're still trying their best to do the right thing. So, and I think a big part of that is being able to face the truth and the reality of things, because I think a lot of the time people just try and hide behind false positivity or whatever the case is. And I'm not saying you should become negative or anything, nothing like that at all. But my whole thing is that people need to start being honest with themselves. And this is something that, we've spoken about before. And I think that it's great to have a group of people like you guys who are like, having a small sort of a group of friends over who can call you out and be like, look, you're doing something wrong, or you should change this or that, which is what I think it is. But even when someone tells you that, a big part of that is going to be you as a person being able to stand that truth, and then being like, okay, cool, then you go work on this. So, if a friend says to you, look, dude, your health is getting a bit bad, you're getting a bit overweight now, you should probably start losing some weight. You've got two choices there. You can either get defensive and be like, no, fuck you, man, like I'm fine as I am, and just carry on living in this fantasy world until, again, that dragon becomes so big that you start having health concerns. Or you can face the truth and be like, and feel that pain, because I know it's painful, because I've been there myself, and be like, hey, look, you know what, you're right, it's painful, but I have to make this change. And then you're slaying that dragon there and then, before it becomes this insurmountable thing. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is that people just need to be willing to face the reality of things, and then despite that still try their best to do the best thing.
So mentioning, facing the dragon, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but I want to go back to it real quick, because I just thought of Monty Python, and how most of us view this thing, and we run from it because we think it's this big, giant, like 200-foot tall, fire-breathing lizard, and it's a rabbit.
Yeah.
Like our fear really isn't that big of a deal. So like,
well, dude, it's just like think the Wizard of Oz is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a guy behind a curtain. Like our fear is not like we trump up that fear. We make that dragon larger than life, and it's not as as yes, it's difficult. I'm not going to say anything that you're trying to accomplish in life or that you're trying to face is easy, but like it's far better to face it now than it is to let it grow and become something that is damn near impossible. So yeah, I'm trying to keep the flow going on this. I feel like we're all very, very silent. I was waiting for some like Jordan Peterson stuff. But he talks a lot about like, how myths, how we've gotten away from myths and like why now we tend to focus more on science. And
yes.
And
well, I think it's just like the day and age. Like people, it's like myths are important because of how they apply to us and what we can learn from them ourselves. And that's not what people want nowadays. People don't want to think about themselves. They don't want to look themselves in the mirror. They want to sit on Facebook and look at other people, and that's like normal because it's easier and it keeps your mind off the difficult things, which are yourself. And it's the same reason people try not to think about stressful things, right? Because it's hard. You hear it all the time, like, oh, I don't want to think about that right now. It's stressful. I think that's why we've gotten away from it, is because like we don't want to look at that stuff. We want to look at the things that are easy and that keep us busy and like kind of like, I don't know, like distract us from the important things. That's why reality TV shows are big and stuff like that. It's just way easier.
Right. So
a lot of this stuff is hard. It's not easy. And that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. Like that's like everything. That's like weight loss, that's school, that's everything, is it gets like built up through movies or through friends or whatever. It'd be like this exciting, fun journey. And the second it's not, people fall off or they quit or they like tell some sort of self-lie. Like, oh, I just couldn't do it because of this. I couldn't know my diet. I had a stressful day at work. Like, and they create these false narratives because it makes things way easier. And that's why we've lost track of these things, is because they're hard and we want the easy way out. And that's natural. That's why most people don't do good things. That's why most people don't lose weight. That's why most people don't graduate college, because that shit's hard and we don't want what's hard. That's why.
Exactly. I think that's what mythology tells us. Like every single, like you have to descend into hell, like to the underworld, right? And that's what, and you have to spend. I remember me and Robbie made this comment. He said that the hero's journey sounds, it sounds awesome and stuff because you think of like becoming this hero, but the truth is that in the real world, there's like 80% of the hero's journey in the real world you spend in this, you spend in the underworld,
right?
Because that's where you grow, that's where you learn all these things, and it goes back to about developing your character. Like you have the suffering and the struggle is worth it, because as you smash yourself, as you hit yourself against the world, you find out how tough you are. And you find out you're more tougher than what you thought you were. But you can only do that if you descend into the underworld and spend some time there battling these demons, your demons even, and then returning the hero. It's like, Jordan Peterson says, you want to aim so high that you can't attain it. And, like most people are like, why the hell would I want to do that? Like, why do I want to aim so high that I can't attain it? Because he says that, because that's in that process, you're going to build your character. And your character is what you're going to carry with you throughout your whole life.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what basically the hero's journey tells us. When you descend into the underworld, when you face your truth and you find out that you're maybe not as awesome as you thought you were and you could be better, that's good, because then you can hit yourself against the world. You can descend into the underworld. You can learn all the things that you need to learn to become the hero, right? So really, that's what the hero is. The hero is someone who can see the reality of things, of life, of the situation, and then, despite that, move forward to make a change. That's right. Basically what I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's super interesting. But you two assholes didn't answer Robbie's question at all.
That's okay. I like where it went.
Yeah. No, I'm just giving him a hard time. So Robbie's question, which I'm about to give like my input on, was like why have we lost these? Like why do we not value these stories or anything?
Yeah, I answered it.
Well, I think we all answered it, but I guess where I was trying to go was Peterson, because I'm not bringing up religion at all, but he did mention that in his interview with Rogan, and that he's like, I think we have forgotten, like we're all looking at science, but the myths tell us how to live as human beings. Like science can't answer everything. Like we know more things today about cancer than what they knew 100 years ago. Like we know now that a doctor probably shouldn't bloodlet you while you're on like a bed like George Washington. Like that's why my grandparents never wanted to go to the doctor, because their parents were like, no, you go to a doctor and you die. Like that's why you don't go to a doctor. Because like throughout history, like if you look at history, people are like, oh, they went to a doctor, and then you read what they did and you're like, that fucker killed that dude. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Dude, like if someone had cancer back in the day, they just cut your leg off. Like you like no anesthesia, nothing. Just you're there and they just chopping your leg off. It's like no painkillers, nothing.
But like things today we don't understand in 100 years, people will laugh at us. They will mock us for what we believed. But I think these archetypes, these myths the reason Star Wars works and Harry Potter and everything else is that it tells us how to live a moral and just life. You know, that you can do this, you can go there, you can conquer your goals. Here's how Hercules did it. Here's how, well, I was going to say Oedipus, but that's just a really weird one. Here's how,
that's a different exploration into like human psychology.
Yeah. So here's how like Odysseus did it. Like, here's how, Thor conquered, they show you how to live and how to.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. So it's like, so Jordan Peterson once said, act so that you can tell the truth about how you act. So I think that's powerful because essentially that's what these stories are. Like, someone done something which was virtuous, right?
Right.
And then we retell these stories so that hopefully we can somehow mimic those stories. So I think that if you use that as like, if you act in a way that you'd be proud of someone to write about your story, then that's a way that I think you can use that as like a compass, so to speak.
Right. Well, and I think that like we see it now. Peterson mentioned this in the interview that like with Rogan, that this is why we see superhero movies coming up, because we've lost touch, with the sort of I don't want to say like what do you say, the metaphysical? Like we've lost that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Look, man. Like Roman wrote a whole thing on it. Like they're the modern day gods.
Yeah.
Like they're the modern day gods because religion is gone, and partially because like since the Enlightenment, like, and then in especially after the Industrial Revolution, like we placed such a huge emphasis on science and learning, which is obviously like highly important and a very good thing. But we now try and live in a world of just hard and concrete rational facts at all times, and we forego real knowledge for that.
Right. But I mean, going back to your point about like the metaphysical and people get all weird about it, but it's like, why? I mean, Jordan Peterson made a great comment about, again, in that Joe Rogan podcast, that any deity or god is basically a meta hero. So they've taken all the traits from like the world's best heroes and they've combined it into this one person, and that person is like the highest version of ourselves, like what we want to aspire to. So I think that if you stop thinking about God in terms of like this random dude with a beard who sits in the sky, shooting down thunderbolts if you do something bad, just think of it as someone like, like Tanner, what's that, like the Greek word that I can't remember it now, but like there's that Greek word
apotheosis.
Right, and I mean there's other Greek word that I love, which is arete, right, or arete, how you want to say it.
Yeah, it's probably arete.
Yeah, which is basically moral virtue. So you're essentially like your highest excellence, which is you living up to to the best version of yourself. And I think you do that by having your morals and some like your goal off in the distance, which is quote unquote God, and you're sort of chasing that. And in the process of chasing that, you're developing your character, and you're becoming the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So that's why I think people get a bit weirded out about this whole thing. When you mentioned God, it was like, whoa, calm down, hippie boy. And it's like, no, it's not about being a hippie or being this like weird monk type dude. It's just about, it's the message, and it's what tells you to do the right thing, but at the same time to have some moral virtue. And in that process, becoming the best version of yourself, which is what God is, right? And that's what it ties back into the whole thing of like what Jordan Peterson said about you want to aim so high that you can't attain it, which is that God-like figure off in the distance. And it's like what Neil Gaiman said in his speech, where he said that you want to have like your goal. You see it as a mountain off in the distance. So you use that as like a compass that steers you in the right direction to tell you what to do and what not to do, which I think is the same thing. Like you have this metaphorical God in the distance, and it's who you're trying to become. And in that process of becoming this highest form or the best version of yourself, you're hitting yourself against the world and you're developing your character, which is what I think, for me personally anyway, that's the way that I see it.
So I know I feel like you guys know this. I feel like I probably said it. So I've been seeing a girl here lately, and church is important to her. And like when I first started seeing her, like I don't identify as a Christian, and I was kind of hesitant to go just because like I've always had like a bad connotation with church, and I don't think it was actually like religion itself. Although I think it partially was. I think it was like the people in it and the hate you see and stuff like that. But a lot of it was like I always, most of us grew up going to church in some capacity, and you hear a lot about it like in a literal sense, like like we're all flawed and God is the way, and you have to give your life to Him, and only by giving your life to Him He'll let you into heaven. And I always kind of like didn't like that idea that like I'm fucked up and I just have to like everything is His and blah blah blah. Like fuck you, I don't know you. But it was important to her, so I started like going. And what's crazy is like I just happened to be going like right after I started really delving into like Jordan Peterson's stuff, and he talks a lot about the Bible. He uses a lot of stories from that to kind of illustrate these things that we go through, these myths and all that. And so I went in there like just trying to learn, just trying to treat it like a lecture and try to learn and try and extrapolate like the narrative, the meaning behind it all. And what's crazy is that like it's by letting go of that like literal sense and just trying to find like the real truth in it, not like the scientific truth, but the real truth in it, like that you're able to benefit from things like these, and you're able to see that religion actually is really important, that it gives you a way of being like a handbook to live or whatever. And a lot of people get real caught up. Like I was actually talking to her about it, and like, is every story from the Bible true? Like, I don't fucking know, but also don't fucking care, because that's not the point. I think the point is like the underlying meaning behind a lot of it. It's like what you just said, striving to be godlike, and that's what you hear all the time. Like people, that's what everybody says. Like, well, we're not perfect like Jesus, but you should try to be, and you won't be him, but you should try to, and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of like, that's just like what we're talking about. Like,
yeah, I mean, dude, like
that, and then I don't know. Like, but even Jesus wasn't perfect. Like there's a point in the Bible where he finds out that I think you guys have probably heard this, that he's gonna have to die or whatever. So he starts talking to God, and he's like, "Why do I have to die? Like, I don't want to do that."
Yeah, ask the Lord to take his cup from him.
Do what?
He says, "Please take this cup from me."
Is that, yeah? Okay, so yeah, he didn't even want to do it, but he had to. Like, that's part of it. Like you have to take the hard road to get to like the higher one or whatever. Like I guess he could have like chickened out and just gone and done his own thing. He's Jesus, I don't know, but he took the hard road and he was rewarded with it. Like he fought that dragon or whatever, which in this case was his death. So he literally had to die or whatever.
Dude, I mean, look at one of the best-selling movies of all time. Probably, I don't know. I don't know if I made that up, but it probably is, like The Matrix, right? The Matrix is basically the story of Genesis. It's like Adam and Eve. Like Morpheus presents Neo. Like Neo's living in this fantasy world, which is heaven, when Adam and Eve are in heaven, and then Morpheus comes along and goes, "Look, I can show you the truth of the world." And then Neo gains consciousness, and when he sees the reality of the world isn't what he thought it was, he had a choice. He could have backed out, like what the other guy did, who sold them out and to the agents so that he could get plugged back into the Matrix. And I think that's what these stories tell you, that look, when you open your eyes to the truth, and whatever that it doesn't have to be some deep thing. It could just be like you realizing that, look, you're a bit overweight now, or you've got some health concerns, you should probably start losing weight. When you start looking at that, the truth, your truth or the truth of the world, it isn't going to be pretty. But then as a hero, you have to be able to make that choice to go through with it and do the best that you can. So yeah, sure, you might find out that, look, you look in the mirror one day instead of checking out, Instagram or whatever, and then you're like, cool, look, you look at yourself in the mirror like, I'm not happy with what I look like right now. Cool. So then then you go and you start becoming healthy, you start exercising, start eating well. And that's you being a hero in terms of you facing that reality and then going and making a change.
If you're listening to this when it was first released, this is part 1. Part 2 will be out January 12th, 2017 on Thursday. So make sure you check back to iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen. Had to break this one up. We went almost an hour and a half with it. So this is the halfway point. I hope you've enjoyed our talk on the hero's journey, myths, Dr. Jordan Peterson, Joseph Campbell, and so much more, and how all this can influence your life. Be sure to check out part 2, which just ignites this fire even more. And will show you why reading, no matter what it is, fiction or nonfiction, can help you in life, and why these myths and the powers of superheroes are so important to me, Tanner, Nick, and Adam as well.
Step up and you gotta get it fitness. Host Rob at the moment and the quest is you gotta check it and wreck it. You're breaking personal records, and with the help of the guest you won't be guessing on the lessons. That's a +5 fierce. Got a low-key bamf right here. You wanna meet him, there's no better way to greet him than to strike a boss pose. Take a look into the mirror.